Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks, Albert, for coming and accepting to talk. So I guess you can start. So we started also recording.
Okay, yeah. Um, yeah, sounds good. So thank you everybody who's listening to this either live or on recording. It's great to be here with the OoLEN network. Yeah, so I've been asked to give some advice or experience, tales from my own experience about what it's like to get astrobiology funding, how to do it, you know, especially when you're first starting off as a new PI with your own research group. So I'll do the best I can here. First, I'll just tell you about my academic journey. I started off as an undergrad at IU. I switched fields actually to original life and prebiochemistry. I was doing a postdoc. Um, and after my postdoc, I spent about a year at LC as sort of a independent research scientist. So at that point, Elsie didn't have the ability to get students yet. But now they do, which is great. But at the time they didn't. And so I was kind of interested in moving to a place where I could get students, like a sort of typical academic research group leader. And so that's how I ended up at UNSW, where I am now in Australia. So I started my group at the end of 2018 when I moved there. Uh, and yeah, I've been doing it ever since. So far, so good. And yeah, I guess it could be pretty confusing about how do you actually get funding? Uh, what is it like? Is it scary? Is it challenging? Is it fun? What isn't? But I thought I would structure this talk by first telling you my own personal experience, of applying to government funding sources. Mostly it's going to be at UNSW because that's where most of my experience is. And then after that, I'll show you kind of an example of a research grant that I submitted that was successful. And then after that, just kind of take any questions. I doubt we'll need the whole hour for this, uh, unless people have lots of questions. So, and feel free to ask any questions along the way, um, for those of you in the audience. So, I started off at Elsie as a research scientist, and so like anybody else, I had to survive on Elsie startup funds. But I only ended up being there 1 year before I moved to UNSW. So I only had a chance to actually apply to some of this Kilkenny JSPS uh, funding schemes, some of these funding schemes. And so I only applied to one and I didn't get it anyway. So um, I'm not too familiar with the Japanese system, which I think most people are who are listening to this might be from that funding system. But I don't think that matters too much because at the end of the day, I believe every country is more or less the same when it comes to the basic funding structures, um, although the particulars might be different. But everybody has kind of the same basic uh, way they give funding, at least for government grants, I think. Okay, so I moved to UNSW and then how did I started my own research group, but how did I get funding at UNSW? Well, um, it may be that all of a sudden you hear of an opportunity out of nowhere and you got to be kind of the first to grab it. So that's one big piece of advice I have here. Just be prepared when opportunity knocks. Uh, you never know when you're going to hear of a new position opening, and you got to kind of be ready at any moment to submit an application, uh, you know, and meet the call essentially to what people are trying to are looking for in terms of hiring somebody. And just, from my own perspective or experience, if you are able or willing to move to a different country than what you currently live in, well, that's just going to open up way more funding doors uh, for you. I realize not everybody is either capable of doing that or, for whatever reason can't do that. But if you're able to, I highly recommend thinking about that. Um, the funding in this field, I think, just kind of comes and goes in waves, uh, and that not only it comes and goes in waves, not only through time, but like different locations, different countries. It's just, you never know where you're going to see the next opportunity. Yeah, and a good startup package is extremely important for getting your career off to a good start, especially for an experimentalist. So you want to make sure, ideally, uh, whatever place that is trying to hire you or that you're trying to work at is going to it's going to offer you a good startup package. Okay, that might be a startup package might be a lot less in terms for a theorist compared to experimentalist, but either way, it's still super important. Okay, so I just thought I would give my 2 cents about what does a good startup package even look like? Um, you know, what is sort of the normal that most people that you should expect for yourself, really? Because I wouldn't want to advise people to just take anything you can get. You should have high expectations. Okay. So in terms of a pretty good startup package, you would want to, you know, negotiate uh, avoiding any heavy teaching your first year, unless you want to become a teaching focused academic, which is totally fine. You would want to try to avoid having to teach a lot your first year because that's going to take up a lot of your time. And you also should uh, not try to take on a lot of administrative duties. Usually that, comes with uh, PhD student reviews and things like that. See if you can avoid a lot of that work. And see if the people that are hiring you are going to let you do that. They should, because they want you to succeed. Okay. Usually, a lot of places, PhD students are essentially free to the PI, but sometimes you actually have to find money to support your student stipends. So if that's the case, a good startup package should give you that financial support to fund your first students. And if you're an experimentalist, usually, not always, but usually you might want to buy a piece of capital equipment, maybe like, if you're a chemist, and maybe something like a HPLC or a fluorescence spectrometer, whatever it could be. Uh, Make sure that you're given the capital to actually start up and do what you want to do in terms of the equipment. And then you should also be getting a budget for just basic consumables and routine lab expenses. And then you should have a budget or have free access to any necessary shared facilities, which, depending on what country you're from, that might be more of a custom than other places. Uh, I think for whatever reason, a lot of Japan universities don't have the shared facilities that a lot of other countries do. But anyway, you want to make sure you have access to that one way or the other. But then you should probably also get a travel budget for going to conferences. And this sort of budget should last for at least a couple years so you can get yourself started. And if you get a really good startup package, they might give you a postdoc too. But I'd say, kind of the norm is these these items up here in terms of a startup package. And so why do you want a startup package like this? Well, it's going to give you time to apply for external funding. And that's basically what uh, your first couple of years are going to be all about. Yeah. Okay, so just imagine you just started your new independent research group at your favorite university, and you got a pretty good startup package, so you can have a lot of free time to get your research started. So, and of course, the big aspect of that is just going to be getting funding. In the first place, you would normally look, at least I would normally look, is to the government. So in Australia, it's called the Australian Research Council. And every country has their own version of something like that, I imagine. And as since this is astrobiology, it's a fundamental science, and so a lot of government research tends to support fundamental research like that, which is great. So just be aware that a lot of times ECRs, early career researchers, won't get as much money as their senior counterparts. That's pretty normal, but maybe in some countries it's more extreme than the others. But usually that's the case, I would think. So don't feel too bad about that if that's what you are experiencing. Um, and yeah, so you want to look for grants that are going to be able to keep your lab running for at least a couple years, I would say. Um, you want to try to get one of these kind of bigger grants right away, so you don't have to constantly be applying for smaller ones that just sort of keep you not from going under completely. Okay, yeah. So, um, what are going to be your biggest expenses when it comes to applying for these grants? Well, if you're not planning on asking for big capital equipment like a mass spec or whatever, then most of your budget's going to end up being going towards paying the salaries or stipends of the postdocs and students you want to hire and enroll. Yeah. Okay. So as far as I know from my experience, no matter what government agency you're applying to, everybody kind of seems to have the three basic things that they want in a grant application. So the first one is your personal accomplishments, expertise, and reputation. Why should we give you this money? So the first part of a lot of grant applications is just explaining why you're the best researcher in the world for this particular project, and then pointing towards your uh, things on your CV, for example, that prove that this is the case. Then of course, they're going to want to look at your actual research proposal. So you need to convince them that this is the coolest thing that's ever been proposed in the world. And then finally, they usually are going to ask for a budget. How much money are you actually asking for? And then you have to justify why do you want it? Okay, so let's start first with the personal accomplishments, expertise, and reputation. Why should we give you this money? Like we were talking about, because you're the most qualified person in the world to carry out the research that you propose. So a lot of this comes down to telling your story. If you make a story out of what you want to do with your career, um, and explain it to people in a way that's really convincing and professional and exciting, then people will tend to favor your uh, proposal more, at least in my opinion. So yeah, don't be afraid to brag about yourself. Everybody has to do it. I know it's kind of weird first time you do it, but like anything, it just takes practice. And the more you do it, the kind of less weird it seems to feel. Just becomes second nature. Yeah. And then, of course, second thing, I suppose, presumably the most important thing, your research proposal. Yeah. So what are you trying to do and why is it this most important thing ever? That's what you're essentially having to convince people of, the people that are reviewing your grant. So my advice here is, and this is especially for astrobiologists in particular, maybe if you're in a completely different field, I might give different advice, but for astrobiologists, I would say you should go big or go home. Don't be afraid to be bold and go after the big ideas. I think really that's what astrobiologists are good at. We're really good at, coming up with these big ideas that anybody can get interested in. So, take advantage of your strengths. I would try to go for really big ideas. Um, especially when it comes to astrobiology related ideas. Okay. The other really important thing, make sure even your grandma can understand your proposal. And, no offense to anybody whose grandma is already a practicing scientist. Uh, that's fantastic. But you want to make sure that everybody who's reading your proposal can understand it. And that's kind of challenging to do. You know, maybe not everybody in the world, but a general scientific audience should be able to read your proposal and have a really good idea of what you want to do and why. And that's because you never know who your audience is going to be. You might know uh, the people in the field who might read it, but that's about as good as you're ever going to get. And it's very possible that a reviewer reads your proposal who just for whatever reason doesn't happen to be an astrobiologist at all. He's just totally different field. And you want to be able to make sure that even somebody like that understands your proposal and why it's important. Okay. And then finally, the budget. Everybody always asks for a budget. How much money do you want and why? So, up until this point, I'm guessing most of you um, early career researchers, before you started your own group, didn't have to worry much about getting money. But, that's now basically a huge part of your job. So you just have to get used to it. And that kind of means you automatically become a part-time accountant too, uh, at least when it comes to planning out a research budget. Yeah. So my advice here is, every country is going to be different, but I would just talk to your colleagues. How much is actually reasonable to ask for typically? You don't want to accidentally offend the reviewer because you asked for way too much money. Um, so you always want to make sure that you're in a reasonable ballpark for your particular funding agency and climate. Okay, and that's pretty much it in terms of the really kind of important. Well, I don't think just if you have any questions, just shout it out. Um, you know, keep it real casual.
I started the recorded again, but if
Yeah.
we go into again the your proposal, I can stop it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. People want to know, but yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Maybe I can start with a question.
Sure.
Um, like when you first started, did you already have, like when you first started your first position, did you already have like a project in mind or like a specific topic that you wanted to focus for 5 years? Or was it more like, let's
Yeah.
go and see this?
That is a good question. Actually, yes, I did. Yeah. Um, and it was based on the research I was doing at Elsie at the time. Um, so from that perspective, that was kind of a good experience for me because I got to spend about a year at LC sort of honing in my ideas. And then that way I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do, at least when I first got there, you know. I had an idea of a specific project. Yeah, so that's you should have like a pretty good idea, especially by the time you're getting at the end of your postdoc, I would say, of what you want to do. Um, and maybe you've even kind of written out a nice proposal already, just in case something comes up at the last minute. Um, yeah, yeah.
And so was it like from this idea that you developed in Elsie, did you like change anything once you
Oh
started?
yeah, I changed. I changed a lot. Almost
Or-
all of it changed. So yeah, um, I wanted to do a lot of radiolysis research because we're doing a lot of radiolysis research at Elsie, who happens to have a really nice gamma radiolysis uh, center. And so Australia too, they also have gamma radiolysis facilities, but as it turned out, it's a lot less practical or inconvenient, or a lot less convenient compared to Tokyo Tech in their facility. I mean, these facilities are pretty rare anyway, so it's beggars can't be choosers kind of. But for us, it was getting like really expensive, and so we ended up kind of just switching all together and doing something totally different. And I don't. Um, I mean, it was still pre-biochemistry, right?
Mm.
But it was basically a totally different project. And I think that's fine. And I don't think anybody's going to look down upon you for that. If it turns out, oh, you first thing you wanted to do didn't really work out. Okay, so now you're doing something new. Great. It's all fine. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is that you're still able to publish something, you're still able to attract students, and you can get funded, you know. So even if you get funded for something and then turns out later on, you know, maybe you just come across something more interesting. Um, I think that's all fine. That's all part of the fun, being able to have that freedom. And so I wouldn't worry about that too much if that's something that happens to you.
Cool. And there is a question on the chat by Silvana.
Oh, yeah.
If you want, I can read it.
Let's
Or
see. Yeah, maybe you can read it out loud. And
yeah. So,
yeah.
how many grants are available for international ECRs in Australia? Since they've recently changed things, and I have been told things are seemingly a bit more restrictive.
Oh, right. I know what you're talking about. Yes. So they recently changed up some of their funding schemes recently. And one of those was called a DECRA. So DECRA is like an acronym for um, I forget exactly, but something to do with the early career researchers, right? It's only for people from like 0 to 10 years past their PhD, or maybe even 5 years. And it basically pays for their salaries. So why is that important? Let's say you had one of these DECRA grants, um, and then basically anybody who hires you gets you for free because the government is essentially paying for your salary for however many years. I think it's like 3 years. Um, yeah, I guess they did they did kind of get rid of that. But it's just I think it's being grouped together in just like in a different scheme. So I think there's still going to be support for early career researchers, but uh, they're changing the way of how you actually will apply for that money. And unfortunately, I don't have the exact details off the top of my head just now. Yeah, but if you're really interested, I could look into it offline and give you some more information. But typically, yeah, for if you're international, it won't really. I mean, in principle, it doesn't matter. I've had I've helped people from all sorts of countries apply to this Australia DECRA scheme before. And yeah, I don't think it should matter. I think what matters at the end of the day is just, how good is your proposal?
And maybe like in Australia, are there any ways or other opportunities for early careers, like if you just finish a postdoc to start, like in astrobiology, region of life lab over there, or is the ECR like the kind of only option?
Oh yeah, I mean, it all kind of depends, I guess. So Australia is a little unique in terms of how it does things, just because it's its own sort of isolated country. Uh, so a lot of the times, the way people get positions as a PI there, starting their own independent lab, is they um, get this DECRA or, they're a postdoc for a while uh, or a particular supervisor. And then, uh, yeah, and then they just stay on at the same university. So whether, like, I don't know if that actually gives you any advantage. It really only works well if you're able to get that ECR funding. And then you can transfer from a postdoc to to an independent PI, just like at the same university or even department that you're at. But I mean, you don't have to do it that way. I think you can just apply for this funding and then apply to any other university that you might want, and you've never worked there before. So it's kind of weird. Australia does things a little bit differently because they have kind of like this isolated culture, I guess you could say. But a lot of people also get hired just, you know, from completely outside the country, which is what I did. So I think they're pretty supportive of kind of like both sort of career paths, whether you're domestic or international. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So
Are there
what
any? Yeah.
most people already actually applied for, funding of any sort, kind of like independently? Because I know these Kilkenny grants, they can
Yeah.
they can be for pretty small amounts, right? And if I remember right from when I was in Japan, ECRs are like highly encouraged to apply for these smaller grants to keep them going. That I think that's kind of Japanese style. Um, there's less of that in Australia. If you do apply for like small grants like that, they usually are going to come directly from the university. It's not going to be like a government funded scheme,
Mhm.
which might seem kind of a bummer, but I think it's good because, you know, as an ECR, you're expected, or you can apply for the same big grants that the big dogs do. Whereas I think in Japan, it's like kind of these bigger funding opportunities are reserved for more senior researchers, and it's like way more money, you know. Whereas here, it's more of a level playing field. So everybody's kind of applying to the same pot, and nobody's getting a ridiculously larger amount of money than anybody else. At least not through these schemes.
Yeah, like the Kaken, the GSPS in Japan, it's mostly for postdocs. But basically, if you receive it, it lasts around 2 years, I think. But if you receive it, you're kind of already kind of at the independent researchers because you join a lab, but you're
Mhm.
not joining under the supervision because GSPS kind of gives you already a little bit of independence. So you're under this
Yes.
supervisor, this PI, but you're almost autonomous in terms of research and budget. But
Yeah.
for other bigger grants, I think the minimum level it's being an associate professor.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 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 I think Japan is kind of like a little bit more hard. hierarchical in that sense.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, which is Japan's kind of well known for that, I think. But yeah, so it's each system has its own sort of pros and cons, you know. Um, what Australia has, you know, at the moment seems to work pretty well for Australia. You know. Um, and I think in general, Australia seems to be pretty supportive of astrobiology research, you know. So like the people that are reading your grants, as far as I know, they're all domestic. So there's not like international reviewers. So it's all within the country. And um, you know, astrobiology is kind of a big community with a lot of different people and with a lot of different expertise and background. But Australia has a lot of representatives from each of those basic subgenres. You know, we got chemists and biologists, geologists, and you know, planetary science people. So that's always good too. You know, you want to make sure you're uh, applying to a university or wherever that has a supportive is supportive of what you want to do. That's pretty important, I think. So it's hard to find out if you know if that's the case. But if you were to get an interview, for example, and they fly you out there and you visit with them for a day or two, then this is your chance to you know interview them as well to find out whether or not you think you're actually a good fit for this place. Because when you go on a job interview for you know becoming a PI, they're basically just trying to feel you out. And, you know, chances are you already gave them a great written application, you know, you wouldn't even got this far. And at that point, if you actually get invited for an interview, uh, they're just trying to feel you out. They want to make sure you like fit into to the people and communities that is already existing there, right? Um, so take you know you need a lot of I guess social skills, I would say. Yeah, because you're going to be sharing the same hallways and stuff with really smart people as well, you know, potentially for a very long time, right? So yeah, you want to make sure you're going to be a good fit just as much as they want to make sure you know you're a good fit. And yeah, you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So is any student, like any candidate PhD student, ever ask you kind of a hard question to fill you out? Or do you have like any question that you would recommend to ask when you're getting interview um, for one of these
Oh,
positions?
like a hard science question or kind of just a hard sort of interview question?
Maybe both. I think we have time.
Yeah, I
Or you
think,
can pick one, like the one that you have in mind.
yeah, I guess did I have like a really hard question that I can remember? I can't really remember. I mean, I remember getting some like really good questions after my talk when I interviewed, you know, and some of them seemed like uh kind of aggressive, you know. But that's normal, you know, you can't let that sort of thing bother you. Um, but yeah, like a lot of the times you're the expert, right? You're going to be coming in with this knowledge set that probably nobody else has in the department. Um, or you know, maybe they're trying to grow a specific area. Okay, so there might be one or two people that know a lot about what you know, but then that's good because, you know, that means that hopefully they would support you, right? So, you know, if you get the feeling like during your interview, people are being overly harsh or like intentionally kind of hard on you in terms of the questions they ask and stuff, maybe a sign that, yeah, man, maybe you don't want to work with these people or something. Right. Yeah. It's a two-way street, I think. Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, in terms of a student asking me like a hard question, is that something you mentioned?
Yeah, that's also something I mentioned.
Like a just like students in my group?
Yeah, like before they, like when they were being interviewed as a PhD candidate.
Oh, I see. I
So
see.
before
Oh,
joining.
sometimes sure. I mean, but again, like not sure what you mean by a hard question. If like a student asked me a question that really stumped me, then I'd be like, please join my group. You know, that's what you want. You want students that are gonna ask those sorts of questions, ask really good hard questions. I think most of the time, unfortunately, at least in my experience, a lot of the times the opposite tends to be true.
Mhm.
Um, not everybody by any means, but a lot of the times you get emails from students, just like cold emails, never met them, before, and they're asking to join your research group. But then, well, okay, that's fine. But then, like the email has really nothing in it, and you can kind of tell that it's just they've sent the same email to like every other professor in the world, So those emails I don't even really look at anymore, right? Um, yeah, so I try to just if I get an email from a student that's really looks passionate, and obviously has a clear interest in this, and maybe even has a CV and a short, letter of or personal statement or something to go along with it, then that's going to capture my attention a lot more. Um, and I'll, probably respond at least, uh, as opposed to like the majority of emails I get, I just don't even respond to anymore because I can tell they're not written um, with my group in mind.
Mhm. And I guess like talking about students, uh, when as soon as you started at UNSW, did you get straight away a PhD student, or like once you started your own research group, you
Mhm.
started to have postdocs maybe? Like what
Yeah,
would be your suggestion for
it,
new
yeah,
PIs?
that's a good question. It actually took me a while to get started. There's a couple of reasons for that. Like I said, Australia is a little bit different in how they, um, set up this system for PhD students. So I didn't really get my first PhD student until maybe about after a year. And then, which was what was really devastating to me was he decided to quit after 6 months because he was really more interested in something else, which was totally different. He was basically interested in what he was doing in his previous field as a master's. So then I kind of had this, that wasted a lot of my startup funds. So I was pretty upset.
Mm.
And then after that, COVID happened. So it's just like everything went out the window because Australia was going through long lockdowns and stuff. But I had managed to get a couple of honors students. I don't know if you guys have heard of like the honors system, which is more British based. Um,
Yeah, so
so
basically
next,
it's full year bachelor students that focus on research.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So your last year of bachelor's, you can choose to do research, if your grades are good enough. And that kind of serves as also the first year of your PhD, if you then decided to go do a PhD. So most of the students that you end up getting go through this honor system. So I managed to get a couple of these honor students before COVID, and that turned out to be, they turned out to be really good, and that was really lucky for me. But yeah, when you're first starting off, it can be really difficult, devastating. Everything kind of seems like it's going to be the end of the world. But then in hindsight, it wasn't as big a deal as you thought it was. Um, yeah, yeah, but there's always going to be setbacks like that, and getting good students, I think, is one of the hardest things about this job because you're also competing with all the other more established researchers out there, you know, and so the best students are typically going to want to go to the most famous or the most the richest or well-established people in the field. Um, but that's just the way it is. You know, there's nothing you can really do about that, except just try to get the best students that you can and convince them to join your group. You know, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, offering them more money is always helpful if you have
Yeah.
it.
I'm sure they'll be happy.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Or it could
And
be like
yeah.
Australia has some of the most unique geology in the world. So a lot of times I think students will come to Australia for that particular reason. If you're a geologist, you know, I don't do, I'm not really a geologist or anything. Um, so, but I think, you know, one of the things that's attractive about UNSW now is that we have this growing cohort of pre-body chemistry people that are there, and not just at UNSW, but in the surrounding universities too. Yeah, so that's always important. You know, if you're interested in astrobiology, you should try to apply to a place that already has astrobiologists there of some sort, because then you at least know that people are going to be pretty supportive. I mean, this
and
community is typically always very supportive. I've never come across anything
mm,
crazy, which is great.
and when you started at UNSW, I think you mentioned it at the beginning. Was it there already a big astrobiology group, or was it a smaller one and
Um,
now it
there
grew
was
slowly?
already the ACA, the
Oh,
Australian
okay.
Centre for Astrobiology, which I forgot to mention. So I'm actually currently the director of that. I took over the job from Martin van Kranenbach. I guess maybe some of you are familiar with Martin through his geology work. But yeah, like Australia already had a big kind of astrobiology community there, thanks to these fossilized stromatolites out in the Pilbara. You know, these really unique geological features. So, which is really great. Um, and then when I came there, I also came with Anna Wang, who some of you might know, and we're both more kind of chemistry based, or at least we work with chemicals. She's more of a biophysicist, I guess, or a soft matter physicist, I guess you would say. But we're both in the same ballpark, which is great. So now we have a growing contingency of more chemical people too. Yeah,
So you kind of had to slowly also build the community kind
yeah,
of there.
that's what I would like to do over the long term. You know, as best as I can. I don't know what I can do directly other than like help people apply for grants and stuff like that. Uh, you know, and just give them encouragement. But yeah, um, hopefully we continue to grow, get more
Yeah.
people out here.
And maybe since it's almost time, maybe one last question. If you have any advice on how to um, write like something specific on the proposal, then maybe people usually have the hardest time
I think the
writing.
hardest, yeah, I think the hardest part for a lot of people is really dumbing down your language. Um, Again, at the end of the day, it kind of depends on exactly who your audience is. But like I was saying, a lot of times it's going to be somebody who's not super familiar with your field or what you do. So you really have to learn to dumb down what you say. Because you just spent like the past 5 years of your PhD and however many years of your postdoc basically learning how to use that scientific language. Uh, and then all of a sudden you have to turn around and kind of not unlearn it because you still need to do it for papers, but you got to like relearn how to do it so anybody can understand essentially. I think that's the hardest thing to learn how to do. But yeah, it just takes practice. And maybe, you know, maybe you want to use your favorite AI software to help you do that, I think that's totally fine. You can use any tool at your disposal to help you become a better communicator for your grants. Um, but yeah, so if you find that useful, then that's good. Um, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, just have to do it a lot and get practice at it, and you'll eventually get better at it. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay.